This class is concerned with benchmarking, which is part of our organizational audit. So let's start. Benchmarking, well, an organization may have a certain expertise that marks it off from its rivals. We would classify perhaps this expertise as a core competency, and that's the subject of a different video. But it may have a certain expertise. Now, benchmarking is a process of identifying an organization's ability to meet and beat the performance of its competitors. So it's a process of identifying. It identifies an organization's ability to meet and to beat the performance of its competitors. It's a search for best practice. It's a search for the best way of working, the best organizational design, the best technology. It's a search. And benchmarking is a way of comparing the performance of different companies who are engaged in roughly the same sort of activity. So there is comparability in the tests. You're able to compare one company with the next. The search for best practice, well, this could be the product or the way in which the product is produced and delivered. So the whole exercise of benchmarking may be focused on developing the product or the way in which the product is produced and delivered. The main aim of benchmarking is to understand and evaluate the current position of an organization in regards to best practice and how competitors can be overcome and weaknesses improved. So the whole idea of benchmarking is to find out what is going on, what is best practice in the industry, what's the best design, what's the current thinking, do some market research as well and see what customers think about this, and overall develop an understanding of best practice, and then try to use this to outcompete the competitors, to beat the competitors, to overcome any organizational weaknesses and to improve performance in the market. Benchmarking requires a business to look at the overall picture. It looks at its overall performance and tries to measure its overall performance with that of its competitors. It can take place in terms of an organization, the business, the industry, the region, or a country. In fact, benchmarking can happen at many levels. A region may benchmark its own performance in terms of the goods and services that the local authority provide and benchmark those against another local authority to see how well it's doing. We are so used to benchmark standards that sometimes we forget about the process of benchmarking itself. A police force in a local area may benchmark its performance against a police force in a different area. Schools in one area may benchmark their performance against schools in a different area to see how well they're doing, to figure out if they're doing better or worse, and look at best practice and try to adopt the best practice to improve their performance. The process will enable a business to understand and evaluate how other businesses achieve their performance levels and what mechanism they adopt to achieve their targets. So in looking at the other organizations, the business learns from the other organizations. It learns how they're going about their task, how they're achieving the outcomes they're achieving, and looking at best practice, in other words, picking up the best way to work and to deliver the product. It helps to explain how excellent performance is achieved. So it's looking at what is excellent. It's not looking at what is second best or what is mediocre. It's looking at what is best practice, what is excellent, and then trying to emulate or trying to copy that best practice. It's a continuous process. It never stops. For it to be effective, it has to be an ongoing activity which the business must adhere to in order to improve performance. So benchmarking is not a one-off exercise. Really, it should be an ongoing exercise, continually monitoring the environment, monitoring the competitors, looking at best practice, looking at the types of products they're producing, the types of innovations they're getting into, and learning from this and modifying the product and modifying the business's behavior and its delivery patterns, its product, its design, its efficiency, looking at the overall performance of the business versus its competitors and making improvements accordingly. It has to be continually monitored, improved and updated. Benchmarking doesn't just happen at a moment in time and is then forgotten about. It's a continuous process, monitoring, improving, updating. Now let's look at how to apply benchmarking. First of all, look into the existing business processes. Look at how the business produces the product and the design of the product and the delivery and so on. Just look at the existing business processes. Then understand and analyze the business processes of other organizations. Do some reconnaissance, if you like. Go and look at how other businesses work. Make observations of their product and the type of design and see what is popular in the market, see what customers are buying, and try to understand and analyze how they got to that position. What are their business processes? Then compare and contrast the own business performance with other organizations. Now you've got a standard reference. You've got two pieces of data, if you like. You've got the business's performance, which should be easy to work out. And then you've got the competitor's performance, the product, the design, the delivery, the aftercare service. Look at all of those factors and then make a comparison between the two, between what happens in the own business and what happens in the other business. And close the performance gap. The idea is to outcompete the competitors, but for a start, at least close the performance gap. If the others are doing better, at least close that gap. But ideally, find a better way of doing it. Now the types of benchmarking. Well, first of all, we have strategic benchmarking. Improving performance by evaluating strategies of the high performers. Look at how the best companies in the industry are performing. Look at how they are structured, where they're located, their HR policies, their investment. Just consider how they're going about it. And that acts as, if you like, a strategic benchmark. Look at the core competencies. Look at how the core competencies are, how they're worked out in practice. For example, are the workers, are they engaging in continuous training, updating and training to promote their skills, which leads to core competencies? Is the business commissioning specialized investment, which again could lead to a core competency? And the product and service development. How is the product being developed? Or how is the service being developed? What innovations to the product has there been over a number of years? How has it changed in style, in functionality? So it's important to understand that the product of the competitor is not necessarily a static thing. It's something which is evolving, and it's important to evolve with that. But ideally it's important to evolve in a way that beats it. But that's the name of the game. Also, the strategic benchmarking will look at the wider external environment. And this may include looking at government proposals for the industry. It may look at international competition. It may look at outsourcing. It may look at the law as it applies, perhaps in terms of employment or redundancy. It looks at various legal proposals that are currently under consideration. It looks at government expenditure on several sectors. It looks at education, indeed, how education is preparing students for lives in industry, and what is the local labour market like. So there are many factors in the external market that the company can't affect, I should say, directly, but which the company must take into account. It may be difficult to employ. It may be difficult to employ workers. It may be difficult to employ specialist machinery. It may all bubble down to cash flow. It may bubble down to finance. Does the business have sufficient finance to employ, or if you like, procure specialist machinery? Does it have the resources to train the workers? Does it have the resources to provide a good working environment? Does it have the resources to persuade distribution outlets to take the product and to promote the product? So it may be difficult to employ. In other words, it may be difficult to do. There may be lots of obstacles. So those are some of the ideas related to strategic benchmarking. We also have performance benchmarking. How is the product performing in the market? How much is it selling? What market share does it have? What's its price? How do customers perceive it? And do this in the context of what the competitors are doing. Try to rate it on a scale. Is it as good, better, worse? Where does it stand in terms of what the competitors are doing? And look at the performance as seen through the eyes of trade associations and third parties. Try to be as objective as possible. Sometimes if a company is looking at itself, it may not be as objective as it should. It may be making excuses for bad behavior or bad performance or bad dealings with the workforce, or not treating the customer with the respect the customer requires, or whatever. So try to look ahead as objectively as possible, and perhaps if there are trade associations or third-party research agencies, perhaps they would be more objective and a better source of information. Of course, when you're looking at performance benchmarking, confidentiality is an issue. It's difficult to go to competitors and ask them what's their performance, what are their performance criteria, and what do they consider to be good practice and bad practice, and they're not going to tell because it's confidential. They have found this out the hard way. They found it out by doing it. And it's unlikely they're just going to surrender this information to give a competitor an advantage. So there's going to be a great deal of confidentiality within the industry. And also you may even find confidentiality within the business itself. It may be that the workers don't want to admit to a task that is actually easy. because if they admit to that, they're going to get more work to do. So confidentiality runs on different levels, and it runs across the industry. It runs right across the company and then across the industry. So there is an issue with confidentiality. Then we've got process benchmarking. Concentrate on developing critical processes and operations. How does the business make the product? What are the processes? And do the competitors have the same process? Or do they go about it differently? And if they do, why do they? Is it more advantageous the way they do it? Is it more to their advantage, or is it is their practice maybe inferior or less efficient than the one in the company? So it's important, however, to look at the processes and the operations to see if they are efficient and what changes can be made to them. Look at producing process maps. In other words, look at all of the activities that the business undertakes to see if there are any which are strictly not necessary, and also look at the ones which are necessary and to see if there are efficiencies that could be gained. The efficiencies could be through procuring a new piece of equipment, or retraining the workforce in a certain way, or just simply reorganizing the way the business is structured, just reorganizing the shop floor, reorganizing the stores, or reorganizing the office. Just simply maybe moving the desks around would increase the workflow. Put in a new network, information network, whatever. To just look at the current practice and see if it can be improved. And look at the short-term benefits of making changes. Perhaps there are things that can be done immediately that will improve the performance. It could be just simply, as I said earlier, moving the equipment around, or changing the way in which jobs are done, perhaps just changing the sequence, whatever. There may be short-term fixes, but really the management should have its eye on the long term, trying to make long-term efficiencies which will position the business in the market more solidly, and that the competitors will be, or perhaps be beaten by the changes. The competitors must at least take the business seriously, and it will engender better competition, and it should lead to a higher return on assets for the business and greater profitability in the long run. But there are short-term benefits, just doing what can be done at the moment, working with what is there, as well as the more long-term planning, trying to get in place the resources and the processes which will generate long-term efficiencies. Next we have functional benchmarking. This is trying to find out the, if you like, the nitty-gritty. What happens on the ground? What happens internally in the competitor firms? And this, generally speaking, hits the problem we mentioned earlier, that of confidentiality. Trying to find out exactly what happens in the other businesses may be a problem. But ideally, the other business will have functional areas, they'll have tasks, they'll have production and research and so on. It would be nice to see how that was structured and try to get some information on it so that the current business can be benchmarked against it. But as I said, there is an issue here of confidentiality that is a problem. If the information could be achieved, then of course there could be improved functions and work processes. The business will adopt best practice, but it means everybody's adopting perhaps the same way of doing it. And that doesn't seem sustainable in the long run. One of the businesses must go in front of the others. One will be more innovative, one will be more competent in bringing about change. So it's always the case that one of the businesses will lead, generally speaking. There's always a drive at the functional level to innovate, to find a new way of doing the process which will save on costs, save on time. It'll save the workforce in perhaps harder work or more physical work. There is always a drive to try and improve the way the product is produced. And the drive for innovation is the drive really for long-run success. Without a commitment to innovation and research and development, the business will ossify. The business will stay as it is and will eventually become out of date and will eventually die off. So to maintain itself, generally speaking, it will innovate. Now, internal benchmarking. This means it's possible to not go out to the competitors to see what they're doing, but to benchmark internally, to find out what different sections do about a certain task and which one does it more efficiently. It's particularly useful if the organization is a little larger and it's making, let's say, several products. Then it may be possible to look at the way in which the several products are made and to benchmark them in terms of their efficiency and in terms of the way the company goes about producing them. You may find within a larger business that different products are produced by different managers in different divisions perhaps of the business, and these managers will have different ways of doing it, and some will be very efficient and some won't be that efficient. But there is an opportunity there to benchmark internally, to try and find out what is the best practice within the business and to adopt that and apply it to the whole business. The advantage is, as I said, they don't have to go to the competitors. There's the problem of confidentiality we talked about earlier. In this case, information can be easily retrieved because it's inside the business. So the company can look inside its own business and try to find areas to compare. In other words, areas for benchmarking. Although it is possible that in some companies, managers may become protective of their sections and of their ways of working, and you may find that there is an element of, similar to a barrier to entry. Some managers may be reluctant to share information with other managers. They like to be the most efficient and they like to stay like that, and they don't want to divulge their secrets because it may affect their remuneration or their long-term promotion prospects or whatever. So you may find a little bit of hiding away within the business itself. So although internal benchmarking is a possibility, there may be an element of secrecy as well, and the management would have to flush that out, would have to determine it. But once the information is out and the company understands how one section is more efficient than the other and it's able to do this internal benchmarking, it's quite easy to apply it across the whole organization. It simply issues an edict or a directive to divisional heads to say that this function will be performed in the following way in future, simply because this is the best practice and this is how it's done in a certain division, and credit to them for having discovered this. So everyone's happy in a sense. The business benefits from a better way of doing it, and perhaps the division or divisional manager who came up with this better way of doing it gets credit for it and is quite happy as well. So internally it's possible, not just going out to competitors, it's possible to do it internally. External benchmarking. Well, external organizations that have a reputation to be the best in class, these are the best ones to benchmark. There's no point in benchmarking failing organizations that are out there. Benchmark the best ones. All of what I'm saying in terms of external benchmarking is subject to the caveat of getting the information. It's subject to this confidentiality problem we talked about earlier. But having said that, if, and it's logical that there should be some element of external benchmarking, then look at the best organizations out there, the most efficient ones, the ones who lead the market. Look at those. Don't look at the failing ones. That would be ridiculous. Ridiculous to copy a company that's failing. Copy the company that's doing best. And try to learn from their practice. But as I said, getting that information may be extremely difficult. But try to learn from it. Try to see if it's possible to pick up some pointers as to how they go about it. There are sources of information. It may be that there are financial reports, or it may be that companies have engaged in business seminars and have talked about the business, and this information is written up. There may be ways of determining best practice, but there is an opportunity to learn from them and to adopt their ways. Trying to get a precise match, of course, between what they're doing and the business means there has to be some sort of comparability. The data has to be in the same area. If it's looking at the efficiency of the administration has to cover the same areas, the same functional areas, and there has to be some way of trying to compare the two. If the two companies are making slightly different products, well, they're different. So the data will have to be looked at very analytically to try and get comparability, to try and get the two working together, so that the information, or the data I should say, becomes useful and becomes information. Next we have international benchmarking. We could widen it again and look at the best practice from around the world. Again, no point in just copying the national best company. Why not copy the international best company? Again, getting the information and confidentiality and all of that is a big issue, but having said that, the logic is, if you're going to copy the best, then copy the best. And the best may be a company in a different country. Globalization and developments in technology provide opportunities for progression. Globalization is a separate topic and we dealt with separately in a video, but essentially globalization is companies setting up branches in other countries, producing in other countries. There's much more trade, much more movement of goods, movement of people as well, movement of capital between countries now than perhaps in the past. And this is all part of this globalization move, that companies see their marketplace as global. They don't see their marketplace necessarily as a particular country. And also, of course, the developments in technology, notably the internet and computer networks. These sort of developments have changed business considerably in the last maybe 20 years and are likely to continue to change business into the future. This means that there's more information about businesses available, and to some extent it's easier to research businesses. It's possible now to check who is making what in some remote part of China. Well, going back, let's say 20, 30, 40 years ago, that would be totally impossible. But now by going online, it may be possible. A few clicks of on the keyboard, a couple of clicks of a mouse or a touchpad, and there you have it. National differences may require careful analysis and more time and resources to implement results. If a very strong company is identified, a strong competitor in another country, the information may not be compatible with what is available in the own business. There may be all sorts of issues confusing the picture. Culture, for example, working practice, the mix between labour and capital, the relative costs of labour and relative costs of capital, and so on and so on. The role of the government, is it more laissez-faire, leave it alone, just let it happen, or is it more interventionist, controlling the development? So having spotted a company that's doing particularly well, perhaps in another country, doesn't mean that the benchmarking exercise is going to be easy, because there are so many factors, in addition to the factors I talked about earlier. So benchmarking is not an easy task. Now, let's look at the benefits of benchmarking. Well, first of all, it provides awareness to organizations' performances and acknowledges strengths and weaknesses. So that's a pretty good one. That means that we become aware of an organization's performances, or organizations' performances. We become aware of this, and we know which company is best, and we know which one is more innovative and which one's best meeting customer needs. And we've benchmarked the industry. We know who's the leader and who's the second leader and so on. And that benchmarking process is beneficial. It can happen internally, as I said earlier, just benchmarking processes within the business to see which one is best. Organizations are learning from other organizations and from industries and markets. They will be more aware of tried and tested methods. Therefore, they will be more confident in trying out new methods. So, particularly with the greater flow of information, as there is nowadays, businesses are more aware of what is good practice, and they're more aware of what is required in order to succeed in the marketplace. And therefore, organizations will be more tuned up, will be more ready to accept change, more ready to accept innovations, and to try out new ways of working. And what they're trying to do really is to get a jump on the competitors, to get an advantage over the competitors. They're trying to beat the competitors by developing new techniques, new ways of working, and so on. And they're doing it because they're aware, because of benchmarking, they're aware of what's happening in the sector, the wider sector. Benchmarking keeps staff involved and motivated, as benchmarking is an ongoing activity. The workers may be keen to see how well they're doing compared to workers in other companies or other parts of the company. So there may be rivalry, and this may keep the staff more motivated. They're more interested to see what's happening elsewhere and to try and beat that. So there's an element of motivation involved in the benchmarking exercise. It also encourages communication in teamwork by developing different solutions to problems. So once the workers know where they are because of the benchmarking exercise, they know that they're lagging behind this other company, let's say, they may form into teams and work more effectively to try and get different solutions to the problem, to try and beat the competitors. Back to the last point, they become more motivated, more energized and more dedicated to the tasks in front of them to try and achieve better sets of results. It provides the organization with an overall picture. They have a good understanding of the feature that facilitates the execution of good practice. Benchmarking enables the business to see what is good practice. What is the best way of doing this? And they can only determine what is the best way of doing this if they have benchmarked. If they've compared it to other businesses, how they did it, and to other parts of the business itself, how other managers are doing it. And so the whole process of benchmarking is try to pick up on what is best practice and apply it. But they can only do that, of course, if benchmarking takes place. It encourages good relationships and communications within the organization, because the workers are so fired up to do a good job because they want to beat the competitors, they want to secure their own employment, they want to work in a vibrant business, a profitable business, because perhaps they'll get higher remuneration, higher salaries, higher wages as a consequence. They're keen to succeed. So there's better communications and better working relationships within the business. So benchmarking facilitates that. Now let's look at a few last points about benchmarking itself, just a few last points to round it off. First of all, benchmarking is a powerful management tool as it provides organizations with the opportunity to implement new methods, to acknowledge best practice and improve effectiveness. Well, that's what benchmarking does. It's a powerful management tool. It provides organizations with the opportunity to, first of all, look at what others are doing, learn from what they're doing, and make changes within the organization to improve practices within the business so they become best practice. So it's a powerful tool that has got big efficiency benefits if it's used effectively. In other words, it's a learning tool, and that means it is able to pick up on best practice elsewhere and apply it, thereby reducing cost and thereby improving profitability and long-term stability of the business. It is a means of learning, developing, and opportunities to prosper as an organization. That's what benchmarking is. It's learning from others. It's drawing comparisons with others and then learning from them and developing opportunities to promote the business, to make changes and promote the business in a way that's more efficient, it's better organized, it has better working relationships, and there is a sense that it is in the business to win. It knows it's in a race. Where it stands in the race can only be determined through benchmarking. So this is an important topic, and this really is all I want to say on the matter. It's actually quite a lengthy video, so I'd suggest when you're going back over it, stop it, wind it forward, wind it backwards, make your own notes, and do some research online into the topic as well. It's an important topic, and it's one which is powerful in its impact on improving business performance. But let's leave it for that for now and say thank you for watching.